Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we are now joined by a freedom fighter, Andrew Bridgen, one of the sound MPs that we have right now in the House of Commons and a member of the Reclaim Party. Welcome to the show, Andrew. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. Thank you for inviting me on.
You are currently your own, I'm guessing, chief whip and spokesperson for all the departments because you're the only MP for Reclaim, and you obviously you're multitasking with everything, and you're the only one speaking out against many important issues. Firstly, how does it feel to be technically on your own right now, and to be fair, over the last couple of years? On these issues because I believe a few days ago in a Parliament, you actually tweeted on the 8th of June that today my request for an urgent question on the WHO digital global health certificate was not accepted, even though there were no other urgent questions or statements. So, what happened there and what's going on?
Um, I've been putting in for debates for many months on excess deaths. I've been putting in for a debate on the amendments to the international health regulations by the WHO, which are a major assault on sovereignty and democracy. And every week I put in for them for an adjournment debate and a Westminster Hall debate, and every week they're not accepted. I've put in for them again for next week. I put in for an urgent question, as you said, um, about the new digital WHO health passport. That was refused, and there was no reason. There was
Yeah, do
plenty
they
of time.
explain it or they don't explain it, do
No,
they?
they don't have to give any reasoning. I've already put in for a debate on Monday, an urgent question. The Johnson and Johnson vaccine in America, the FDA have ruled that it's not to be administered anymore, and all stocks are to be destroyed. The Johnson and Johnson is very similar to AstraZeneca.
Mm,
It's a DNA strand inside an adenovirus vector to get it into the cell. So it's very similar technology to the AstraZeneca vaccine that was pulled.
right.
And obviously, my urgent question is, what are the government going to do about this? I believe it's concerns over blood clots, which has led to a loss of confidence in that vaccine in America.
Yeah.
Um, and we'll see if on Monday we get an urgent question, because clearly a number of people in the UK, I think there's 12 million doses of it went out in the US. People will have had it in the UK, and they're going to need to have advice. Should we still be giving out these vaccines in the UK if the FDA have decided they're going to destroy them?
Yeah.
So we'll see. I'm not holding my breath. You know,
It
Maya,
is.
when I go down to the Labour end of the tea room and say, join this petition for a backbench business debate on excess deaths, which we're having every week, and the Labour Party say to me, we don't want to talk about it. And I said, well, you can stand in that chamber and say, it's those terrible Tories, they've destroyed the NHS, you can make your political points, we'll get the debate and the public will, have some transparency on this issue. When they say, you've come to the wrong pub, we just don't want to talk about it, I know there's something seriously gone wrong in our democracy. And that's where we are now. So
Mm,
it's very hard for me to get called in the chamber of the House of Commons unless they have to call me. Um,
yes.
and,
But
and, and obviously, if you actually think about it, all the parties have got a vested interest. So during the lockdown and whatever went on with the vaccines, the SNP were in power in Scotland, Labour were in power in Wales, the Conservatives are in power. I mean, they've all got their hands in the blood, so to speak. And I think it's
yes,
very
I mean,
fascinating how many people who are in the cabinet now are either not standing at the next election or getting out of Parliament fast.
but I'm going to get into your obviously recent battles when it came to obviously also lockdown harms that you've been exposing and the fight against the World Health Organization's new treaty. But on this issue, quickly, firstly, we've seen footage of you standing in the House of Commons to ask a question and on certain topics, and MPs just walk out, for example. That's just one a version of essentially shutting down debate or ignoring debate. But the whole of the House at this point, the way the authority works, is that they are without explanation. They are also shutting down the debates. Is it not really concerning for democracy?
It's very concerning for democracy, and I can feel the hostility every time I go into the chamber. And I mean, they jeer before I even, as soon as I'm called, if I do get to speak, I mean, as soon as I stand up, they're jeering at me. But that isn't the whole House of Commons or even Parliament. There are about 4,000 real people, Maya, that work in Parliament. They're the cooks, the cleaners, the security guards, the clerks, even the staff of MPs who would stand in that chamber and say the vaccines are still safe and effective. I speak to them all, and they all know it's a massive cover-up.
Mm.
I had an experience a couple of Thursdays ago. I'm sitting on the terrace waiting to go in for my normal battle with Penny Mordaunt at Business of the House questions, and a black lady came up to me. She's a cleaner. She was on the terrace, and she just bent down and whispered in my ear and said, "Andrew, I'm in the prayer group in Parliament, and I want to assure you we're all praying for you."
Oh
They
wow.
all know. All the people who work in Parliament know. They know that the vaccines are not safe, they're not effective, and they know it's a massive cover-up. But the people who can make a change are living in some sort of parallel universe where they don't want to know. That's why they walk out of my debates. If I'm wrong, debate me. Give me the facts, put your arguments, say, well, I don't like Andrew's data, I've got this data, but they don't. They just want to call you a conspiracy theorist
Yeah.
and walk away.
It is absolutely insane. Recently, I think it was only last week when you stood up and you were talking about lockdown harm. Firstly, you challenged both the government front bench and the shadow cabinet. Firstly, the shadow cabinet side, they responded to you by saying, "But you were part of the Tory government. You supported that did lockdowns." Clearly, they didn't listen to your question because you were always against all this.
If the opposition had done their job during the lockdowns, there would
Yeah.
have been enough rebel Conservative MPs to have certainly, I think, stopped the madness of the lockdowns. That's all being discredited now. I mean, the Institute of Economic Affairs came out with a report last week, which studied, I think, 22 empirical reports, and lockdowns were tremendously damaging. But to have a government minister, when I know the figures for suicide rates in my constituency, and they went up about 350% during the lockdowns. I had more suicides in 1 month than we normally have in a year. And I asked him what the suicide rate increased in his constituency. And bear
Yeah.
in mind, his constituency is only down the road in Harbour in Leicestershire. And he said there was no evidence at all that the lockdowns caused any suicides. Well, I mean, we're living in a post-truth. The truth and science no longer matters. Not in our parliament.
No, no. I mean, but on this issue, we have around the world some countries and governments, including ours, they are doing some inquiry into the lockdown days, but they're not doing the inquiry that we want. They're mostly doing inquiry into why didn't you do a lockdown sooner and harder? Are we ever going to have some sort of international inquiry or some sort of on a national level about the actual lockdown harms rather than, well,
No, I don't think so, because all the governments around the world seem very keen to hand all health and pandemic powers over to the WHO, who are unaccountable and unelected. And in fact, there's no one more unaccountable. They don't pay tax anywhere in the world, even local taxes, and they're all immune from prosecution because they've got diplomatic immunity, not only for themselves, but for their families as well. So I can't think of anyone more unaccountable and unelected. And as you know, the WHO, if they really wanted to stop the next pandemic, they would have done a proper in-depth inquiry as to who funded and developed and where it was developed the last virus that came out of the lab. And the fact that they're not willing to do that investigation, I mean, it speaks volumes. It's a bit like the government not wanting to have a debate on excess deaths. The answer is they know the answer.
yeah, and exactly. I mean, clearly, it's absolutely astonishing that they have legal immunity. At least they believe in immunity when it comes to themselves. So is it?
Well, if you
Is
look at the
it?
track record of some of the people in there, whether it's Dr. Tedros and his very checkered past and links to some very dubious organisations, or the chair of the World Health Assembly, Harsh Vardhan, who was an Indian minister who had to resign in disgrace from the Indian government because he was actually promoting a fake drug to the Indian people. And he's the chair of the World Health Assembly, which appoints the Director General of the WHO, and is doing all these negotiations over the new post-pandemic treaty, handing over powers to them, and also the amendments to the international health regulations. It's crazy.
It is. So it seems like just like the European Union, all these international bodies are essentially a platform for failed politicians or failed experts or failed professionals, and that they just basically get promoted to those roles. Final question is the battle essentially over in terms of the pandemic treaty? Is it going to happen, or is there any way any of these countries, including
Now,
ours,
the
can actually
pandemic,
step.
the pandemic treaty will require a vote of both houses of the House of Commons to be ratified. But it's clear that Labour and the SNP are going to support it. I just wonder, even if all the Conservative MPs who aren't in the government and the DUP voted against it, whether we'd actually have the votes. But on a point of principle, I mean, this is sovereign powers, which I don't think politicians have a right to be able to give away, because the sovereignty belongs to the people. It doesn't belong to me. We're merely the custodians of a little bit of power until the next general election, when you hand the powers back and they elect either you again or somebody else to carry on. This is actually the opposite of taking back control for the people, which we voted for in 2016 at the referendum. The international health regulations are even more worrying because they're an amendment to an existing treaty. There's no guarantee that we'd even have a vote in the House of Commons, and the government don't even want to have a debate on this. And I think the WHO are running two horses, and they don't mind which one wins. If the treaty gets watered down a bit, they've still got these amendments which are equally damaging and take massive powers for the WHO. And, you know, if it's not binding, we're told by the minister in the vote in the debate we had in Westminster Hall, which was only achieved by the public petition of 156,000 people. Well, as we wouldn't have had a debate on that. The minister said that there was no loss of sovereignty. Well, when you look at the treaty and it's crossed out non-binding, I mean, that means it's binding. And then you've got 13A, which says that the measures will be taken against countries that don't comply fully with the recommendations, well, the dictates of the WHO. And there's a whole section on how they will punish countries that they feel have not fully implemented their dictates. Well, I mean, that sounds to me like it's obligatory. Otherwise, they couldn't possibly have sanctions against you under the World Trade Organization if it wasn't mandatory. So, you know, again, we're being lied to, I'm afraid.
Yes, no, absolutely. It is absolutely concerning, and on this channel, we're going to keep you guys posted on all these matters, especially over the next few months, because we're going to have a lot of battles on our hands. Thank you so much, Andrew. Any last few words?
Well, they asked me, you know, why you're willing to sacrifice your career on the hill of vaccine harms, and Maya, that the reason is that's the hill they're killing my people on, and that's a fact.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for joining us, guys. Let's get back to the show.